star that lights the road. I take this ride. Just drive. I wanna be the only one to make it to the light. I take it to the edge where I live 1,000 lives. Or maybe I could be the one. I'll ride into the setting sun tonight. Just drive.
Hello, welcome to the testing notebook for day 2 of the final test here in Bahrain. Now, so many things to tell you about change-wise. We've done a lot of the technical changes, but there are also a lot of sporting regulation changes that I want to take you through. That's why Steve Nielsen, sporting director from Toro Rosso, is with me. And Steve produces a run-through of all the sporting regulation changes for distribution to people in his own team, and it runs to 3 pages. More sporting regulations than we've had changes for a while.
Yes, certainly. Some small detail stuff and some major stuff, and it's as you say, Ted, it's more than we've had for many years. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about driver penalties first of all. Now we've got sort of points on a licence that a lot of people hopefully are not familiar with. How many points do you accrue? How many do you get at once? And what happens when you get to the maximum number?
Well, much like your road car licence, there are different numbers of points for different offences, if you like. They stay active for 12 months, and when you reach 12, you get a ban.
A one-race ban?
A one-race ban.
Okay, so but they would tend to get handed out 3 at a time, do we think? Or is that up to the stewards or charge?
The more common total is 3, but there are less numbers than that and greater ones than that, depending on what you do. But
okay.
Once you get to 12, you're out, and they stay there from the date that commences the offence is committed. You get the points. They stay active for 12 months.
Okay, so after a year they get cleaned up. There are also new drive-through penalty changes as well. It's now is there still a drive-through, or is there now just a 5-second stop and go?
No, we've still got a drive-through, and we've still actually got the 10-second stop and go penalty. But now we've got something which we're loosely referring to at the moment as a penalty lap, which means that at the moment the FIA can only give you a drive-through penalty, which is pretty draconian for some of the minor offences. And so they've arrived at a penalty which is that you come into the pits when you're going to do a pit stop. The car's stationary and you then can't touch it for 5 seconds. You then perform the pit stop and you go, which is unlike a normal stop and go where you can't actually work on the car.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a bit less of a hit, but also you can elect not to serve that and add it on to your race time at the end of the race.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it all depends on you actually wanting to do a pit stop or needing to do a pit stop. If you don't need to do a pit stop, then obviously it becomes a much greater penalty, which is exactly what you're trying to avoid.
Okay, so we could see people at the end of the race, if they've already done a pit stop, don't have to serve it, battling to try and get a 5-second gap to the person in front and then get a penalty, but they actually won't lose a place.
Yes.
Right, okay, good.
It's not perfect, yes.
Okay, all right, well, let's rattle through it. Engine penalties, should we go on to them? You've got 5 of each bits that make up the power unit, so 5 of an engine, 5 of the KERS, the 2 KERS MGUs, and then 5 of batteries. Can you mix them up? If one fails, you can mix them up?
Yeah, absolutely. Each separate element is sealed, and collectively they're referred to as a power unit. And thereafter you can interchange them once they're sealed, providing you don't exceed the grand total of 5 per item.
Okay, so if an engine fails but your, say, MGUH, the energy recovery system that runs off the turbo, if that fails but the engine's okay, you can nick a new MGUH from another bit and put it on.
Correct. So it's going to be fairly easy to keep a handle on to begin with, and then very complex once you get further into the season.
That doesn't actually account for the fact that physically, as we've seen in testing, they always take about 8 hours to change anyway, so it's going to mean you're out of qualifying. If you've got to do something like that, say it fails in FP3, you're going to be out of qualifying, aren't you?
I think what we see is normal. What you see in testing is always takes longer and is a little bit less organised because of lack of parts than you see later in the season. So it's true to say we're at the bottom of a learning curve with this stuff. It's also true to say that what takes 2 hours now will probably take an hour in a few months' time.
Okay, interesting. And if you go past those 5, then what do you get? Is it a 10-place penalty if you start to use a 6th bit of any of those power unit?
Yeah, it's a 10-place penalty for every item that you use.
Okay, after that. Talking about people being unreliable and say if you have to miss qualifying. Has any changed in that department? Can you still go and be in the race even if you miss qualifying?
Yes, I mean, there's no changes there. It's the normal requirement, as long as you have... It's not absolutely cast in stone, but for example, and this is the most common application of it, if you have set a time that's within 107% in the previous session, FP1, 2 or 3, that would be enough to include you in the race, if you miss qualifying completely, yeah.
Okay, and let's talk about the 100 kilos of fuel. Some people might not realise that it's 100 kilos you have to carry in the car from lights out to checkered flag, so you'll actually have more than 100 kilos in the fuel tank, so you've got to do the formation laps. But what happens if you do the race and the FIA sensor says that you've used more than 100 kilos? What happens then?
Exclusion.
Oh, disqualified?
You're right, yeah.
So you are going to see people fuel saving like crazy, because otherwise there's no point being in the race. You'll get excluded.
No, absolutely. The 100 kilos is, as you say, it's from lights out to checkered flag. And if there's a red flag, for example, all the fuel used even during the red flag session, we found out a few days ago, also counts from your 100 kilos. You have to carry enough for the formation lap and the in lap. So you'll start with probably 105, 110 kilos, and you'll always be limited to 100 during the race. So in some instances, you'll be fuel limited on some tracks and others not.
Okay, well, if you do get to the end of the race and you've won, you're allowed to do a act of celebration now. Do you like this new rule? It's a donuts rule, we're calling it.
I think it's popular with people that watch the sport, and that's important. And I don't think there was anything wrong with what Sebastian did at the end of last year. It's Formula One in general is, you don't see much of the human element of it. So when there are chances for people to express it, I think it's good.
The likelihood is that nobody's going to do it because their engineers will absolutely kill them, because they're going to be stressing what are already very stressed parts.
Yeah, sure. And with double points available for the last race, that window of opportunity is now much smaller than it was.
Double points available for the last race. That's actually made it into the regs now, has it?
I believe so, yeah.
I was
a bit afraid you were going to ask me whether it was the last single race or the last 3 races, and I don't know the answer to that, actually.
Well, there's a meeting of the strategy group, isn't there, today?
So,
which is deciding whether it's going to be the last 3 races. I'll be amazed if that happens, but still, we will find out. Testing changes. You're allowed some filming days, 2 filming days, and there are 4 in-season tests?
Correct. It was 8 filming days last year and 4 aero days. That's now been reduced to just 2 filming days. We've actually already done both of ours. There's no young driver test. So all that's been replaced with 4 in-season tests, which take place in Bahrain, Barcelona, Silverstone and Abu Dhabi.
On the Tuesday after the race?
Correct, Tuesday, Wednesday, yeah.
It's a 2-day test, so you'll have a Monday off to rebuild the cars and then...
That's right, and a single car will then do Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay. All right, good. There is a trophy for the most poles of the year. And that's actually in the sporting regs.
That is now in the sporting regulations, yeah.
Okay. Do we need to say anything about that? Quite self-explanatory.
It's kind of irrelevant for us, honestly. We will always go as fast as we can in qualifying anyway.
Qualifying, we should talk about that. There are some rules changed on tyre allocations. Excuse me, something's just got in my eye. You've got an extra set or are they still talking about extra set of tyres in qualifying at the moment?
It's been decided by the sporting group and been approved by them, and that's gone to the strategy group today, I believe, for final approval. And
an extra set of soft tyres in the beginning of Q3.
Correct. The reason for it is there were circumstances last year where it was actually advantageous not to run in Q3 to save your new tyres for the race. So to get rid of that, there's now a set of tyres available for all those that make it into Q3, which they can only use in Q3 and then they lose. Okay. So there's now no advantage to sit it out.
All right, and talking through, and I hope you're bearing with us, there is another set of tyres available in free practice 1 to encourage people for the first half hour not to just sit in the garage. Correct,
yes, there is, and also in free practice 1 now we can run more than 1 driver in the same car, in the same session, which is new.
Okay.
We couldn't do that before.
That's good. Any changes to, there is a change, but tell us about it, the driver leaving the track and gaining an advantage. It's now, Charlie says, I think, the lasting advantage. He's changed it slightly, that if it's not an instant advantage, it has to be a lasting advantage.
To be honest, I need to be careful what I say here, but that regulation and the interpretation of it changes so often. It's really, really difficult to keep up with, and it's generally based on the last incident, whatever that was.
All right, let's gloss over that one. Driver numbers, as everyone knows, everyone's got chosen their driver numbers. I'm interested to know what happens if you have to change drivers say, I don't know, Van der Gaard has to come in and replace Gutierrez or someone, or your test driver, I'm not even sure who your test driver is actually now, but has to replace Danny or Jean-Eric. Have they already nominated their numbers?
Yeah, each team, obviously our 2 race drivers have had their numbers nominated, and we're given 2 other spare numbers for our test drivers or other drivers we may run. And then those numbers are then allocated to, if Felix da Costa has a go in our car, we already know what his number will be.
And the number has to be displayed somewhere on the driver's helmet and on the side of the car more prominently than in previous seasons.
It has to be, I forget the exact wording, but basically the roll hoop camera has to be able to see the number on the top of the driver's helmet. So there are no actual sort of sizes for the font or the size of the lettering, but it has to be clearly visible, I think is the wording.
That's why Adrian Sutil's number, which is 99, from the front actually looks like 66, because it's pointed the wrong way.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Good. Pit crew have to wear helmets in qualifying. Good idea?
I think a really good idea. Believe it or not, that was a rule in GP2 last year, but it was never a rule in Formula 1. And I don't know why, it just kind of slipped through the net. But after Mark's incident in where was it? Germany, was it? Where unfortunately the wheel hit the photographer. It was already a suggestion from the sporting group to make helmets mandatory, and that was the catalyst to bring it forward, and it's spread into qualifying this year, which is a good thing.
Okay, talking about unsafe releases, as you were, Mark Webber's, with that tyre coming off, the unsafe release from a pit stop is now extended into practice as well, and that can lead, if you do that, to a grid drop, a grid penalty. It's another worry, isn't it?
Yeah, unsafe release was a sort of a collective term for actually a number of different types of offence, and now we've kind of broken it down more and specified what those offences are, and I think it's a good thing, because releasing a car into a path of another car, something we unfortunately did last year, had a collision with the caterer, is not actually the same as releasing a car that then the wheel falls off on turn 1, and they were all kind of being lumped together as unsafe release, whereas in fact they're very different things.
All right, finally, let's wrap this up, because we're running out of time. Gearbox penalties, and you've got 5 jokers and curfews. Yes. So there are still penalties for changing a gearbox, rather than, you've got to keep your gearbox for 6 events rather than the 5, but you are allowed to change some ratios.
Yes, we can do that once during the season, yeah.
Okay, but how many jokers have you got on the gearbox penalties and the curfew rules?
I don't think there are any jokers on the gearbox penalties. I think it has to do 6 consecutive races, and that's it.
Oh, okay, so the joker is only that you're allowed to change, if you've got your ratios horribly wrong, you're allowed to change a few of them once.
I believe so, yeah. It's not. We're getting a little bit off my expertise here, but right. I believe the ratios you nominate at the beginning, you have one chance to change those during the season, yeah. Okay. I mean, change the ratios, not the actual physical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, right. And the curfew, because we've seen with this new technology, people are going to be working later into the evening. How many times are you allowed to break the curfew?
They've decided that we don't need 2 opportunities to work all night. We can now have 6, which is great, I guess.
Okay. All right, thank you. Final just word, anything in here that we've missed out that massively stands out, and just final thought about the season coming from your point of view?
I don't think so. I mean, we've talked about the sporting regulations. Obviously, there are much more complex, huge challenges on the technical side with the new engines and so on, and it's going to be a real test of all of us, I think, for the first few races to get to grips with it all.
I'm sorry to say it, bad for you, but brilliant for us watching. It is going to be a bit bonkers, isn't it?
I think it's going to be unlike anything we've seen for quite a while, yeah.
In Formula 1?
In Formula 1.
Wow. Steve, thank you so much. We'll let you get back to work and join us in a few moments when we'll be giving you the rest of what's been happening on a busy day 2 here in Bahrain. Welcome back to the Notebook. We've just got a few more minutes of the session still to go for this second day of the final test. And I want to show you Marusha didn't sound very good. I want to show you a very interesting pit board, and that's this one. 18 laps completed for Daniel Ricciardo, and that's really good to see, because that is the most consecutive laps that Red Bull have done, pretty much, certainly in this Bahrain test. I think the last test as well, and it's pretty much for the whole of testing. So that is great progress from Red Bull Racing. And let's just have a look at the lap times that Daniel Ricciardo is doing. His last lap was a 1:42.4. So that's not quick, it has to be said. That's kind of towards the end of a race stint with reasonably heavy fuel still in. But anyway, reliability seems to be getting better. So that is good after what was a bit of a difficult day for Red Bull, with seemingly not too many laps able to put together in the morning, and having to do some aero work and some pit stop practice as well. You can see the guys are just waiting outside the garage to come in. I think it was always a question of Red Bull just being behind. There's no doubt that they're going to get there eventually, but it's whether they're 6 weeks behind or 8 weeks or less than that, and how long it's going to take them to catch up. In the flesh, close up, aerodynamically wise, the Red Bull is the prettiest car. It's the most well-designed car. Looks to be, one of the most well-designed cars. A Newey trait. Look, it's gone up to 19 laps. Hooray! Celebration for Red Bull. There's no doubt they're still in trouble, but it's a question of how quickly they recover. That is Esteban Gutierrez in the Sauber. So, a better day for Red Bull. They put out a piece on their website having a go at some media who'd run a story about something Sebastian Vettel was meant to have said back in Jerez at the first test. That it was thought that he said something like, there's no point, as we just go through the fence here. See me on here. Hello, Pete. It was thought that somebody reported, and I'd heard this as a rumour, but I hadn't reported it, that Vettel had said something like, "There's no point driving this car. Oh, it's useless carrying on with this car," something like that. Ricardo then went back on the record and said Adrian Newey's gone back to the drawing board. Not gone back to the drawing board in terms of to fix this car. He's gone back to his drawing board to make revisions to this car so that it will be reliable by the time we get to Melbourne. And while it's the kind of thing you can imagine Sebastian Vettel perhaps saying, in a moment that he was annoyed with the car breaking down, there's no point going out in this car again, brackets, it's just going to break down. It was reported, there is Ricardo, it was reported that Vettel had said this, and Red Bull have come out and not exactly denied it. They haven't 100% denied it. They've just made clear that they're very irritated with the rather exaggerated reporting coming out of some outlets about Red Bull Racing. And thinking back to what we've said, I think you take your own view on this, but I think we've been pretty fair in what they're doing. And if it was, I think I said they'd struggle to get out of Q1 if Australia was this weekend, and I held true on that. If Australia was this weekend, they would struggle to get out of Q1, and they probably wouldn't be able to make half distance in the race. But luckily for Red Bull, Australia isn't this weekend, and I'm sure by the time it gets to Australia, they will be in better shape. But still, we should not underestimate the problems that Red Bull are having, because they are long and varied and many. Okay, all that sorted out. Let's talk about Mercedes. They haven't got the reliability that we spoke about on the first day. They had a gearbox problem today, which ended Lewis Hamilton's running with about an hour and 20 minutes still to go of the day. So another glitch. Having said that, they did do 89 laps. And that is some decent laps on the board. Come with me, Pete. Interesting thing Nico Rosberg said, a couple of interesting things Rosberg said yesterday about the straight line speeds. He says, wait till we get to the Chinese Grand Prix, because you will see some unbelievable straight line speeds, up to 230 miles an hour in China. And as we explained yesterday, that's just the fact that it's a more slippery car, less drag, and the fact that we've got turbos and all the energy recovery systems just boosting that 1.6 litre engine when it runs out of puff on the straight to give some eye-wateringly top speeds in these cars. So that will be very impressive. But he also said, we know where we are. We know where McLaren is because they have the same engine. We know where Force India is. We know where Williams are. We just don't know where Ferrari are. And that's what Rosberg said. Checkered flag, end of the session. It's presumably what you're looking at, is it, Pete? Yes. That's the big question for Mercedes. Where are Ferrari, pace-wise? If you look at it today, Ferrari are not in a great place. They're a tenth or so off the fastest time of the Force India. And on race pace, as it is today, they look to be at Force India's level with the Mercedes engine. On qualifying pace, Ferrari are clearly ahead of the likes of Force India and Williams, and up there with McLaren and Mercedes, as I've been reporting on. Pure one-lap speed. It seems to be Mercedes and then and then McLaren and Ferrari. But where are Ferrari? Are they running with heavy fuel? Are they going to surprise everybody when they get to Melbourne? Are they perhaps better than they look over the long runs? Would they be running more than 100 kilos fuel? Well, you can't really fit much more than 120 kilos in the fuel tank anyway, so why would they be doing that? It's a big conundrum. Where are Ferrari at the moment? Interestingly, in this Ferrari, they haven't had to open up the cooling. It's been quite hot here for the last couple of days, as you can tell by my attire. They haven't, yeah, all right, Pete, no one needs to see that. But they haven't had to open up the cooling in this Ferrari. Look at this extra sort of barrier garage that they make here. So that's clearly that they are still well on top of things with cooling. They haven't had to add any more gills like this McLaren have, or open up the cooling like some of the other cars have. In fact, I say that, just watching Jenson Button pass me, they've closed off some of the gills in that McLaren. Oh, lovely noise as we get the... and that's the good thing about these quieter engines. You can hear all the tyre squeak. So why don't I dispatch you, Pete, to run after Jenson Button. You can have a good close-up of him while I tell you about his day. Not the best day. Transmission problem kept them in the garage for a very long time. But once they'd fixed that with the gearbox and the transmission, they were able to do some more laps, which was very, very good for them. He ended up 5th quickest, Jenson Button, 52 laps. Ricciardo ended up doing 65 laps, which was pretty good. Alonso, 122 laps. Wow, fantastic reliability. I'm up on the pit wall with Charles Pick, by the way, if you're looking for me, Pete. So fantastic reliability for Ferrari, managing to do 122 laps, as well as all the other things that we've been telling you about. Oh, I didn't mention the front wing. You might as well just follow some cars as they come in, Pete. I'll just stay here. They had a new front wing on the Ferrari, which was more of a sort of Red Bull style front wing, more aping the Red Bull wing that we've seen in recent years. Very nice and intricate. Their front wings haven't always worked for them, the new ones that have come out of the wind tunnel from Ferrari, but this one seems to be an improvement from the one that they launched with and the one that they ran at the Jerez test. So that is good for them. Felipe Massa has managed to do 103 laps for the 4th quickest time. So it's ended up Perez, Alonso, Ricciardo, Massa, Button, Bianchi, Hamilton, Verne, Gutierrez, Maldonado and Ericsson at the end for Caterham, but we'll get onto them later. We might as well mention Felipe Massa while we're here. Did a bit of aero work in the morning and then did a race distance in the afternoon. So that's 2 days running that Williams have managed to do a race distance. I hope you got your long lens on, Pete. You can see Daniel Ricciardo pull out of the pits there. Good, so you have. Am I safe to cross the pit lane? Yes, session's ended. So they did a race distance, 2 race distances then in successive days for Williams. They're going to start really pushing the car, both in terms of performance and pace and reliability, tomorrow and the final day of the test. That's when we're going to really get a read on how quick the Williams Mercedes is. No trouble with fuel saving. I've been asking various people about this. Certainly the Mercedes runners, Nico Rosberg was saying it yesterday, and Williams have said this as well. You get the old lap where the engineers can see. If you weren't with me in Jerez, you wouldn't have known, but there's an active telemetry link on the car with the fuel flow meter, which tells the pit wall in real time whether the driver is going to make the end of the race with the amount of fuel he's got left, whether he's going to make it with the 100 kilos. It's a spy in the cab, effectively, so the engineers know in real time whether the driver is saving enough fuel. All the Mercedes teams are saying, do you know what? The fuel saving in the middle of the race, when we're doing these simulations, isn't that bad. We're only getting a call now and again to say save fuel, save fuel on this lap. I think they call it a fuel save lap. But there doesn't seem to be the panic that we've perhaps feared with a lot of other teams. Whether that's the same for the Ferrari-powered teams, rumours that the Ferrari engine is more thirsty than the Mercedes, we will see, and we haven't really seen enough running from the Renault guys to know what the situation is with them. Sauber, since we're here, and the cover is coming down on the car quickly. They were doing... What were they doing? Yes, Esteban Gutierrez, qualifying runs in the morning, then they did a race simulation. They've also been doing tyre work. It was important for Sauber, certainly, to understand, because it's quite punishing on tyres around here, both in terms of overheating and ultimate wear, how the tyre how the tyre compounds actually work and wear out. So they've been doing a lot of tyre work, Sauber. Of course, they were one of the best teams on their tyres last year, were they not? In fact, for the last 2 years. So that's something they're very keen to engineer still into this car, that it's very kind on its tyres. Because amongst everything else, with the engine changes and everything else, with the sporting changes, as we've heard, that's still going to be important, to be kind on your tyres. So that's something that they want to do. Lap times weren't brilliant. Gutierrez only 9th quickest with a 1:39.96. Toro Rosso, let's just wrap them up. You've heard plenty about from Steve Nielsen. Well, that rather understated. I think it's going to be the most interesting year in Formula One for some time. Not a great day for them. They did have their problems, didn't manage to do many laps for Danny Kvyat and Jean-Eric Vergne, but they've done one each so far, so both Kvyat and Vergne have a day left. Vergne ended up with a fastest lap, a 1:39.6. 61 laps, so the only person who did fewer laps than Jean-Eric Vergne was Jenson Button and Maldonado and Ericsson. Oh, I haven't told you about Maldonado. The car caught fire. We don't think it was the exhaust failure that they had yesterday, because they'd gone back to the safer exhausts. You would have probably heard more about this on Sky Sports News and throughout the day. But, yeah, the car caught fire on track, and then it came back, and they had to repair it, and they didn't manage to do the second half of the day pretty much. So not a good day for Lotus. Force India, they believe, as I've said, that they're pretty much on a race pace equality with Ferrari, which is good for them. They were fastest again today with Sergio Perez in qualifying trim. So all credit to Force India. They are reliable and they are quick. Whether they will carry that on throughout the season, we will have to see. Good day for Marussia. Jules Bianchi's first day of this final test, he managed to do a 1:38.1. That's half a second quicker than his teammate Max Chilton's best lap of a 38.6, and is still makes and furthers Caterham's worries that Marussia have really stolen a march on Caterham, and Marussia are going to seem to be able to pull well clear of Caterham early in the season on the evidence of what we've seen so far in testing. He was a very sort of shifty looking engineer, wasn't he? I think he was looking at something else, Pete. I'm not sure he was looking at you. But there's Graham Loudon. Sadly, we haven't got time to talk to him, because I need to tell you about Marcus Ericsson. 2 or 3 breakdowns they had. I think it was 2 breakdowns Caterham had, and ended the day not with very many laps and with plenty of problems still to go. Excuse me, so scratch my nose. Final thought. On tomorrow, we're going to be explaining the brake-by-wire system, and we're going to be having a look at the steering wheel. And a final thought on FOTA. They have disbanded today, as I revealed exclusively, possibly, I don't know, I don't really, yesterday, but they've disbanded today. It's the feeling on either side is that if you're a supporter of FOTA, if you're not a supporter of FOTA, like Ferrari or Red Bull, you'd say that what they were working on in terms of the budget cap was being done by the FIA anyway, and we were never going to agree, because we've sorted out everything with Bernie directly, so there's not really any point to FOTA anymore. But since Martin Whitmarsh left McLaren, or rather was sacked by McLaren, it seems that FOTA lost their biggest supporter. And had there not been the massive changes this year, maybe Ferrari and Red Bull wouldn't have been so distracted and might have actually supported FOTA and kept it going. Certainly the likes of that man, Graham Loudon, and everybody else feels that it was a move that the teams will come to regret. So said another team boss. And Graham, I'll just ask you very quickly if that's all right. Another team boss said to me the dissolution of FOTA will be something that the teams will come to regret. So much that they could have done that was non-contentious, and now it's been disbanded. Just very briefly, would you agree with that kind of summation?
Yes. I think, there's a lot that FOTA could have done that was contentious as well as non-contentious. So
they weren't proposing that. They were proposing just to keep alive and try and further, the fans getting closer to the sport, etc., and work on things like organising these tests. Yeah. You're going to have to appoint somebody to organise the test now.
Yeah, and and things like getting the fans closer. That there can be no break in that at all. We have to find a solution to that instantly. As far as I'm concerned, we can't let stuff like that slip at all.
Yeah.
So. There's some ingenious thinkers in Formula One, so I'm sure there'll be a plan of some sort to fill some gaps. But I think it's important that any gaps that involve the fans get filled super quick, because it is important. We've got to do it.
It is. Okay, thanks very much. We are running out of time. Good day for you, though. Good lap by Bianchi. Yeah.
P6, still plenty more in it. So
moving ahead of Caterham.
Yeah, well, we're ahead of a few others there, but it'd be interesting to know where everybody really is. It's a difficult one to predict, but I think we've had a really good day. A lot of laps as well. That's the key thing. Okay. So we're happy tonight, I think. Good. We'll see what tomorrow brings.
Okay. Graham, thank you so much. That's it. We're out of time. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.